In this video, we continue our Affinity learning series looking at the key differences between linked and embedded files. In Affinity, you can place images or text in smart ways so that they will act much like smart objects do in Photoshop, allowing you to build smart templates and smart workflows that will save you time. However, to do this, you really need to understand the difference between placing items as linked items versus embedded items, and then also placing JPEGs or PNGs versus placing other Affinity files. So in this video, we're going to walk through the differences between these options, and I'm going to show you how you can use this information once you really understand it to build smart templates that will continually save you time. All right, let's dive right in. Here I am inside a blank Affinity design project, and whenever you're working on a design like this, you can place another image inside of this design file, and you can do that two different ways. You can place it as a linked file or as an embedded file, and understanding the difference and how that affects things going forward is going to be important. So first of all, to place something, you're going to come under the file menu here, and you're going to find this place option. But just below that is the placement policy. And underneath here, you can see you can import images as linked files. And if you're not importing files as linked, you're importing them as embedded. So when you actually click on this and then come back to that, so go File, under that placement policy again, we see now it is checked. So if it checks, that means you're going to be imported in a linked file. If it's not checked, that means it's just going to get embedded. Now, what is the difference? So let's go over this. And I think the best way to go over this is by working through a few examples. Okay, so let's start in this blank Affinity design file. Now I have a few artboards in here. If you're not familiar with artboards, I can link to the tutorial up here. I've downloaded this channel with artboards, so you can check that out at your convenience. But let's go ahead and let's add some linked files to this design. So I'm going to come under here. Let's just double check placement policy. Yes, it is linked. I'm going to go ahead and choose place. Now in this directory, let me just switch it over here so we can actually see the file type. So let's just go ahead and do details here. And then we're going to see that in here, I do have some JPEG files, and then I actually have some Affinity files. So I'm going to start by adding this linked JPEG. So this is just a JPEG, just a flat image. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and then we'll place it in here. And then right below it, I'm going to actually add an Affinity file. Once again, we're going to make sure placement policy is linked. And again, it's going to stay checked on unless we check it off. So we're going to go ahead and place, this time we're going to add the linked Affinity file. So let's go linked Affinity file right here. So here's the linked Affinity file. And these are just graphics that I set up ahead of time. So this image of the wolf, and then also I saved it off as an Affinity file and then a flat JPEG. So we have the linked JPEG here, and then we have the linked Affinity file here. So the reason why I'm adding in a JPEG and an Affinity file, because it acts a little differently. Even if you're adding them both as linked files, a linked JPEG is going to behave differently than a linked Affinity file. This Affinity file acts more like a nested document where you can double click on the image itself or the thumbnail over here, and it's going to open up that original file. Now this is also linked up here, but it's going to be a little trickier opening that up. So let's see what I mean. If I just double click on this linked Affinity file, so I'll just double click with my left mouse button, and we see that it does open up that original file. So here it is, linked Affinity file. Now I could actually close that. I could have also clicked on the thumbnail right here. So here's the thumbnail. So instead of clicking on the file over here, I could double click on this thumbnail. And once again, it's going to open up that linked file. Now, if I come and try the same thing with the JPEG, it's not going to jump to that JPEG. It's not going to open up a new file. I can double click over here. Nothing's happening. If I come over here and I double click on the JPEG, we'll see that it looks like maybe it did something, but it just actually zoomed in. So if I grab my zoom tool and I zoom out here using my Alt key to get to zoom out, and I zoom out, all it does when I double click on that is it zooms into that layer. So again, zoom out. So it's not opening the same way this one will open. So this really isn't a nested file. It's sort of placed in here, but it's not technically an embedded file. It is technically still a linked file, and we're going to see that in just a minute. Okay, so because these are linked files, what is going on? That means that it's actually just storing a reference in this file to that original file. And I'm going to illustrate that that is true in just a minute, but first let me just go ahead and create some different copies of this. So I'm just using the Alt key on my keyboard to drag out some copies. So let's put some different copies of this JPEG. I'm also going to drag out some copies of this linked Affinity file. So I'll put one here. We'll size it differently. We'll put it down here You can also even add the same linked files to a different project. So here's a second project. I'm going to come to this project, and once again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to place, and we'll place that linked Affinity file again right there. So we're going to open that up and we'll place it in here. And then we're also going to come in here and we're going to place the JPEG again. So place, and we'll come in here and we'll place the linked JPEG right there. So we'll open that up. Boom. So now let me go back to that original one. So we have this same linked file, because I'm saying it's storing a reference to the original file when you place a linked file. And I'm going to come in here now and show you the difference between updating a JPEG and updating an Affinity file and seeing how it works. So we know from the Affinity file, you can just double click on it, either on the thumbnail or on the image itself. So I'm going to double click on the image itself. And so what if I were to come in here and we're going to update this text? So let's just type in update, something like that, and then file save. So we'll come in here and we'll save this. And now we see linked resource change. So if I come back here to this original file now, we see that we see the update here. We see it in all the copies of that. So those are all referencing that other file that we just changed. And if I come into the second project, then we will see, yes, it is updated here as well. Okay, so that is when you update an Affinity file. Now let's go back to this original one here. Now let's attempt to update the JPEG. Now we can't update it automatically by double clicking on it, but we can update this original file if we know where it is. Now if we forget where we put it, there is a resource manager in here that we're going to use to manage all of this when we need to. And you can find that by coming under Document and pulling up this Resource Management. So Document, Resource Management. When you do that, it's going to show you all the files in the current design project that are going to be linked or embedded files. So here we have this file here, and it's linked 3 different places. So this is the Affinity file here. So we can see all the different instances that are all linked. The status for all of these is okay. And then here's that linked JPEG. So again, on the linked JPEG, here are all the different instances, and they're all the same. We can click on this one here. It's going to nest any files that are the same file together like this, but you can twirl it open if you want to see the original ones. But then once you do that and you highlight something, you have some different options in here. So I could just replace this image if I want to, but I could also show it in Explorer, and I can see where it is in Explorer. So if I click on that and then I were to pull up my Explorer window, which is flashing now, I can see it's highlighting that linked file here, linked to JPEG. Now by default, this is going to open in Photoshop. That's just the way my computer is set up here, but I can open it manually in here. So let's go ahead and go File, Open. Let's open up that linked JPEG right here. So I'll go ahead and open this up. And so now we're working on this file that is linked, even though we have to open it separately. We can't double click on it to open it, but we can still come in here and open it. Now this is just a JPEG file, but I could do something in here to change this. So I could just drag something out like this, and then I could put in a color here. So let's just do Alt Backspace to fill with white, something like that. And let's just save this. I know this isn't necessarily a picture you would use, but we're just saving this. Now remember, we're not saving an Affinity file. We have to save it off. We have to export it as a JPEG and overwrite that JPEG file. So let's go over Export. We're going to choose JPEG. So here's JPEG. We'll go ahead and export. And we're overwriting this JPEG here. So we're going to leave it named the same. Do you want to replace that? Yes, we're going to replace that. Now, Resource Manager, linked JPEG has been modified outside of the application. If I come back here now to this first file, it does not update automatically the way our Affinity files update automatically. So I do recommend linking Affinity files themselves. So in other words, you might want to open an asset, save it as an Affinity file before you're going to place it if it's something you're going to use in a template, because then it's going to update automatically when you do those updates. This does not update automatically, but you can get it to update again by using that Resource Manager. So now if I go under Document again and pull up this Resource Manager, it's going to show these 3 here have been modified. So we see how the status says modified, and now I have an update option. So if I click update, it's going to sort of update these. So these sort of do get embedded in here as pixels because they're photographs, but they still are linked in a way because it is referencing that pathway. You can see when it's updated, and then if you click update, we'll notice now that goes ahead and that updates. Now it just updated the one version here, so let's come in here, and I think let's make sure we're on all these. So this says mix. So in other words, some of them were updated, not all of them. So let's just go ahead and select all these here. Go ahead and click update. Make sure these all get updated. So it's making me do them one at a time. So again, this is kind of, or maybe I'm clicking on the wrong thing, but it's a little bit more cumbersome than using that Affinity file where it's automatically going to update. So we see those did update, but again, if I came to this other project here, again, manually, we would have to come in here and go under Document, go under Resource Manager, come in here, and then use that update option. Now, another option we have in here, if we didn't want to update it, if we just wanted to replace that image altogether with a different image, we could highlight it here and then use the Replace option. So let me just go get a totally different picture. I'll just grab this t-shirt mockup, and again I'll just grab, actually this is just a PNG file, totally different image, but that's fine. Let's just put this image in here, and we'll go ahead and close this now, and so we have a new image in here. But if I jump back again to that other project here, so let me just go back to this first project here. Again, if I bring up this and we bring up the Resource Manager, we see that all of these are okay. It does not update all of them when you use that replace thing. It's just using that one instance in that other file. So again, using Affinity files just does seem to be a little bit more useful when it comes to updating things quickly and using something perhaps in a template, which we're going to get to in a minute, versus using a JPEG file. Let's switch now and let's talk about placing embedded files versus placing linked files. So I'm going to jump to this other project here. And now we're going to come in here, and this time we're going to place something as embedded. So let me just go back here, and we'll switch off of this to Pixel for now, Pixel Studio, and we're just going to go in here and go under File. Again, we're going to come down under Placement Policy. It's not checked, so that lets me know instead of linked, it's going to place something as embedded files. And just be aware when you jump from one document to another, you may have to double check and make sure you know what this setting is. So it's not placing as linked, so it is going to place as embedded. So we're going to go ahead and place something now. I'll go back to this file here, and we're going to place this embedded JPEG. So we'll go ahead and put that up here, and then we're going to go ahead and again place one more time. This time we're going to use this embedded Affinity file. So this one here is an Affinity file, not a JPEG file. Give it a second until your cursor changes, then go ahead and drag out. There we go. So now we have an embedded JPEG and we have an embedded Affinity file. So just like before here, we'll notice that they have the different icon here, and this just shows as an image. This shows as an embedded document. So if we obviously double click on the thumbnail of the JPEG, it does the same thing where it just zooms into the layer. It's not going to open that. This embedded file, even though it's embedded, it still acts like a nested file. So we actually could double click and open this, but I want to show you that it's not going to be the same as that original file like it would be if it was a linked file. So if I were to go here to the Affinity Home and just open a file. So let me just go here and open, and let's open this one that we added here. So we added this embedded Affinity file. So let me go ahead and open this here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this, and if I come in here and make some change, so we'll just call this change 1, and then we'll go ahead and save that. So file save, and if I jump back to this embedded file here, we're not going to see any update. And it's not something where there's a lag, because even if we come in here under Resource Manager by going to Document, Resource Manager, we're going to see that it shows this as OK. So it says OK for the status here. And we're going to see we have this embedded Affinity file, but if we actually double click on this here, first going to our Move tool, and again, you can double click here or on the thumbnail over here, making sure we're on the Affinity file. So if I double click on that, you're seeing it actually opens a different file. So it has its own version that it creates of an embedded file when you add it. It becomes part of that document. So even though it's nested, you can open it up in here. So we'll notice we don't see that change 1 that I added before. I could come in here, grab this text tool, come in here. Let's call this change 2. And I think I don't even have to save this. I think when it's embedded, it automatically saves automatically. So then if I come back to this file here, we're going to see that it does have that change too. So it's referencing an embedded version, an embedded nested document, not the original file itself, because here's the original file itself. So that's a way that embedded files are going to act different than linked files. Now there's some other considerations when you're thinking linked versus embedded. If I bring up Windows Explorer to actually look at these files, we'll look here. Here's the project with the embedded files, and we'll notice that it's almost 33 megabytes. Now the project with the link files, this is super small. and that's because it's just creating references to those images. This embedded files is sort of building everything in to the one project. So I could send this file, the embedded file with the embedded files, I could send this to someone and it's all going to be contained within that one file. Now it's a larger file, so that's a disadvantage, but an advantage might be that it's all contained together. I'm not going to break it by forgetting to send the linked files. On the other hand, with this project with linked files here, we can see the file size is almost nothing. But if I just sent somebody this project and I didn't send the files that it depended on, then they could break. So let's just simulate that, because I know this file right here has this linked Affinity file. So let's just temporarily move this up into this temp directory. And now let me just go back for a second here into this document here. And so this document says Resource Manager. We noticed that we all of a sudden saw something change there. And if I actually come in here and I go under Document, Resource Manager, we can see that this one here is missing. So it still has this one reference here because I had it open on screen, but if somebody else opened this and they hadn't had this file open on their computer, they might just see sort of a placeholder here or an error message. They're not going to see this itself. It is going to be missing, and they're going to have to go back in here and they're going to have to find it. Now, maybe you sent them the file and it's in a different directory, or they want to bring in a different file. They could use this relink option, and since I moved that to a different directory here, I could look in this directory, tell it's in this directory now, select this folder, and then we can see everything is okay now. But you can have a situation where files break if you don't send all the files for a linked file. In other words, you might have to send a whole directory and not just a file if you're using a linked file. So there are advantages if you're talking about moving those files around or sharing them with someone else. There are advantages and disadvantages. When it comes to templating though, I really think using linked files is the way to go, because they work like smart objects work in Photoshop, where they really are their own nested document. You can nest them within other documents. You can use one document across multiple other documents. I think you'll see when we work through a simple example here. So let's take a look at this Affinity project here. Now this Affinity project has a number of artboards, and on these artboards, rather than using like the image directly, we are using a linked image, and I'm also using a linked background color and then a linked title. So we're going to look at some of the different files I've put in here. This may look complicated, but it's actually quite easy to set up. So you can imagine, if you're a content creator, a smart workflow might be combining the use of linked images with something like the use of artboards. Now we're learning all about linked images and how they can be beneficial in this tutorial. I also have a tutorial on artboards, so if you need a refresher, I will link that above. Now this particular project I've called Social Media Template, but if I go to my File Explorer here, so Windows Explorer because I'm on Windows, and I look at this actual file, it is actually quite small. That's because everything in here is a linked asset. So I'm keeping this file very small, because within this file, I reference a logo Affinity project, a background color, I also have a title in there, and then a main picture. So I've done this in a smart way so we can easily come in here and update this content. Imagine, for example, for this example, if you're a food blogger and maybe you wanted to quickly be able to swap out an image and then suddenly get some slightly different graphics and also size for different social media platforms you might use. So let's see how this would work. So I would just come over to my main picture asset here, and right now I have one picture in here, but if I were to drop in another picture and then go ahead and save that, so we're going to go ahead and save that, then when I jump back to that main project, we're going to see that this is automatically updated with the new picture. So let me zoom in a little bit here on this one up here, and then also you might want a background color that matches up, since I'm making use of some other color areas in some of these designs. You might want to come in here and be able to update as well. So I might come in here and maybe I'm going to sample the color of this pumpkin, since this is a pumpkin risotto here. So I could do something like come over here. Let's just go ahead and grab this color picker. I'm going to sample maybe this orange right here till I get an orange I like, and then I'll go ahead and copy that. So Control C just to copy that color code, and then I'll jump over to my background color because this is again linked in some of the assets here. So then I could come in here with this. Let me go to my fill tool up here. We're going to do solid. We're going to do solid, and we're going to come in here and let's double click on this. Let's try that again. Let's come in here. Let's put this color right in here. And so now we have this new color. So go ahead and file and save that. And then once again, go back to that main file that's referencing all this, and the color is going to update automatically. Same thing for this title text. So if you want to come in here, and this is no longer cranberry cupcakes, so we would come in here, and this is going to be pumpkin risotto. So I could come in here, make sure I have caps lock on, pumpkin risotto, and I could go ahead and I have some subtext in here. So any way you want to set this up, you can set this up. So you just got to sort of think ahead, think smart, and sort of be strategic about how you set up these files. But again, then you can very easily come in here and make small changes, and it's going to change across all these different files. Now, of course, I can still come in here and make some really quick, easy edits. Like I have pictures within frames, so I can come in here, I can shift pictures very easily. I even have logos in here where, again, this is making use of an artboard feature. So if I come down to this logo here, let me just click right on it. Since this file right here, let me just show you what my logo is being referenced from. So let me find that logo artboard. So we'll notice that I have multiple different versions of this logo, and I can reference those now back in this original one. So if I come back here, since I have that linked artboard here, or that link file that has multiple artboards, I should say, now because of that, I can click on that, and very quickly I could come in here and I can try some different logos in here. So you have different versions of the logo. You can cycle through, find the one you like that works best with your graphic. So very easily you can come in, and if you set this up strategically, you can do a little bit of work and save yourself a lot of time. Now you can do really complicated things. Let me come over here, and you can see that these are just images, but these images have different filters applied. So all these filters, all these other different effects, you can apply these on top of those linked object. So it's working in a smart, non-destructive way, and if you combine the use of linked elements along with artboards, there's so much you can do, and you can really build out a workflow that can save you time. So just for quick review of some of the important takeaways here, when you're replacing elements and you replace a JPEG or a PNG as opposed to an Affinity file, then it does not act like a nested document. You cannot double click and open it. Now when you place a linked JPEG, it is still technically linked, but you're going to have to open that independently, and then you're going to have to use that resource manager if you want all copies of that to be reflected as updated. That's why Affinity files are going to be maybe more useful, because they will act like nested documents. You can double click to open them, and then those updates are going to automatically occur. And then comparing the difference between linked elements and embedded elements, remember, embedded elements are directly added to the new design, so they do increase file size and the document is self-contained. So that can be good if you want to be able to move things easily. However, it maybe lacks some of the flexibility you get with the linked versions, because with the linked version, it's just going to store a reference. And so if you add an original file as a linked file to multiple designs, you could just update that one original and have it update across multiple designs. You're also keeping file size small, making an efficient solution. You just have to remember that you do have to maintain those dependencies. So if you move an Affinity design that has some linked files placed within it, then you have to also move those as well. Otherwise, you're going to break those links within your project.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.